So it is James Mitchell, otherwise known as Escape Punk Lefty, here with another video. Before we get started, we need to talk about the passage of that horrible bill. I won't be largely affected by it, but my heart goes out to all the working poor and even homeless people that are going to lose their health care and benefits. And some people say that we shouldn't feel bad for the people in rural areas that voted for Trump that's going to lose their health care. While I have a certain irritation with them, I wish this wasn't the way that they learned their lesson. I wish they could have learned their lesson a better way about voting power and voting about, certain people's interests and special interests. And I just wish that we lived in a better world where we didn't have to, see people that are literally gonna unalive. They're not gonna survive till the next day because they've lost their health care. Just give me a split second. I want to turn my fan towards me. Right now it is 90 degrees in Detroit. Okay. Without further ado, let's get into our main video. So basically, ironically, and I feel like this bill and its lack of empathy and complete God damn it. Aggression towards the working classes, complete aggression and class antagonism towards the working poor and working class shows that Donald Trump's movement, the Make America Great Again movement, is not about economic policy. The problem with Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uyger and so many other people that fall into this dynamic where they think that they can appeal to right-wing voters by meeting where they at, you can't, because when it comes to certain points in life, and as we discuss politics, there's a right and a wrong answer about certain issues. There's no middle ground to most issues when we're talking about politics. That's number one. Number two, let's be real, and it's the most important thing that Cenk Uyger and Anna Kasparian, before they got paid off, realized: the animating force of the right and people who vote Republican, even working class Republican voters, is bigotry, is white supremacy, is sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia. That's why people vote Republican. People don't vote Republican for economic populism. In fact, economic arguments are only a smokescreen to waste our time arguing against him, when through time and time throughout history, we've seen the conservatives in any government and at any point in time in history not only be against human freedom, but stand against the progress of the working class of that nation or whatever else that might be governed by two or more parties. So as we get into this video, that's the main thing to keep in mind. And as Cenk Uyger has gone on and spoken to people like Charlie Kirk and what have you, and talking about breaking bread and having beer with people that don't even see, and this has to be said, especially when pertaining to black issues, don't see black people as humans. He says that when black people achieve things, it's because we are DEI hired. This Charlie Kirk is Mr. If you get out of if he gets on an airplane and found out the pilot's black, he's gonna be scared. So with that in mind, that goes to show that anything viewed as progression, not only for minorities but working class, is viewed as quote unquote wokeness, is viewed as reverse racism, whatever they have to or false accusations that trans women are against women's rights and they're the real feminists. So every instance on every social or economic issues, especially with the passage of this bill, we can see right-wing people all over the internet saying, this is what I voted for. I want to see people deported. I've debated several people on TikTok over the past years where I bring up the fact that conservative policies is what's causing so much turmoil and dysfunction in this country, and they say it's their fault and they deserve it. So without further ado, we're going to watch about maybe 15 minutes of this, because I don't want to be here all day doing just one video. But let's just get into this and see what happens, because I watched this video a couple days ago, but I don't exactly even remember what was said exactly in this video. I know a rough estimation of what was said, but I don't know exactly what was said.
movement? Just give me a yes or no.
That's an absurd framing, Kyle. That's mainstream media framing.
You can't say that MAGA is fascist. Wait. You really don't believe MAGA is fascist?
I am against Trump, totally. Okay, but why do you love Trump? Will be the next question. Okay.
Did I ask that? Cenk, talk about a straw man. I mean, you're making up stuff I never said. Let me answer your questions. Come on.
What's the point of coming on here if I can't answer your questions?
Cenk, I'm giving you plenty of time to answer, brother.
Because they know you're bullshitting.
Making up stuff about me. I didn't say that.
Okay,
so you want to talk about straw men? You're inventing things on the spot.
It's a mistake talking to you guys. It's a mistake.
Welcome, Cenk Uyger, the Young Turks. We appreciate you joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, you want to explain? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, Cenk reached out to Kyle and I this week and said, hey, I think we got some things to talk through. Can I, let's have a conversation. So we said, sure, let's do that. And this kind of follows on the heels of a discussion/debate that you and I had back in December, where, the launching point, and you can, correct me.
Really quickly, because this is on my mind before we get into the rest of this video. So, one way that right-wing politics is promoted is by a false notion of centrism or apoliticality. So instead of outright, lots of right-wing commentators like Cenk Uyger, he won't outright say he likes Trump, similar to the way somebody like Asmongold won't say he likes Trump, right? But when it comes down to it, whitewashing and saying that there's bridges that can be built and that he's a populist, maybe some good will come out of it, whitewashes the abject failures, the white supremacy, and the complete gutting that is happening to the working class of this country, done by the Trump administration and his affiliates. So it's, he maintains plausible deniability by saying, I don't like Trump. Tim Pool does it. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, but for some odd reason, every time I watch a podcast of yours or I come out of a video, it sounds like to me that you're a right-winger and that you want to support and whitewash the horrible shit that Donald Trump has done over the past 10 years to this country.
You don't think that this is a fair characterization of this conversation. But the launching point was a tweet that you had put out expressing some optimism about the Trump administration. So we can put that tweet up on the screen from Cenk to refresh everybody's memory about where we started. So you said, in November 29th, 2024, I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election.
Exactly like this. I'm going to let her read the quote before I comment on it.
No, I was so against the guy who won. I know now MAGA is not my mortal enemy, neither is the extreme left. My mortal enemy is the establishment, and they have been defeated.
And it's like, I don't understand what he means by this, because we all know that right-wing populism is pro-capitalism and right-wing populism is also just fascism. So just because Donald Trump won doesn't mean that the establishment is shaking in its boots. Fascism and right-wing authoritarianism in no way threatens the status quo of capitalism in the United States of America. That's why billionaires and most rich people funded Donald Trump's campaign. And even though Kamala Harris raised more money through like donations and what have you, Trump, had donors like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg. The point being is that it's clear that Donald Trump and other right-wing populists are often at a time supported by the rich people, because at the end of the day, they, if not maintain the status quo of economic inequality, they will actually opt out to make things worse, like today with the passage of the big beautiful bill. So I don't understand how Donald Trump being back in office, a fascist being back in office, a man who literally ran because he wanted to avoid going to prison, a man whose poor legislative understanding is still affecting the lives of working people to this day, a white supremacist, to keep in mind too, is still, his legislation and the way he governed affected us throughout Biden's administration and even affects us today. So I don't really understand when people say, when Cenk Uyger is saying here, when he says he's more optimistic. And don't get me wrong, I'm optimistic that there's an opportunity to try again. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, a Republican getting into public office of any kind, state or federal, or even becoming a mayor of a city, is a definitive bad thing for the entire country, because it normalizes the white supremacy and the pro-rich agendas of these Republican politicians, which has no threat to the status quo and no threat to the establishment. But I digress. Maybe I'm crazy.
Over the course of that conversation, you explained to me that the reason you felt optimistic was really two reasons. Number one, as you say there, the establishment was defeated. And number two, you felt that the elements of the populist right and the bros would hold Trump accountable. And it kind of built to this crescendo where he actually turned to the camera and said, listen, guys, in a little while, you're going to be able to say whether I was right or whether Crystal was right. Let's go ahead and play.
Another interruption. And keep in mind, again, it's like I said earlier, the animating force to the Make America Great Again movement is white supremacy and white nationalism. The motivating force to the Make America Great Again movement is not, how can I say, it is not, you know, economic populism. It is not a wish to reduce government spending. These are topics that your average Joe Rogan listener does not even understand. They don't understand how government works. Some of these people don't even know the 3 branches of government and say that they wanted to fund PBS because they're pissed off that their kids are learning that black and gay people are human too. So these are the last people on the planet Earth who I feel is going to hold any government official accountable at all, because they have not researched enough into the subjects about governing and poverty and dealing with things like race issues or sexuality to understand, you know, what people are going through and what legislation is necessary or what rhetoric is necessary to expand the greatest amount of freedom in this country. These are people who literally say, who are class traders often at the time, who say that if you get paid poverty wages by a job, you deserve it.
That portion, as a refresher, that is element number 2.
I want to address something to the audience. Can I?
Sure.
Is this my camera here?
I remember this.
Okay, yeah. So right-wing populists, it is now your job to prove Crystal wrong. Okay.
Go out and do it, y'all.
So she doesn't believe you. And by the way, almost no one on the left, other than me and Anna, believe you guys that you actually want to cut the Pentagon.
Because you're paid to believe them. That's why.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
And that you could pressure Elon Musk and Donald Trump to cut the Pentagon.
I'm making fun of you for free.
So are you going to prove the left wrong, or are you going to prove them spectacularly right? Am I going to have to come on here and apologize to Crystal for ever believing in any right-wing populist?
That's the funny thing, is that I can guarantee you through this debate that's coming up, even if I just make it to the 15-minute marker, you are absolutely not going to apologize for that bullshit that you were saying all these months ago. You're going to try to whitewash it and pretend like you didn't say it. Simple, the typical right-wing strategy of when something bad happens or something inconvenient comes up, y'all try to whitewash and downplay it and pretend like it didn't happen and you have nothing to do with it.
And say, oh, I was a sucker. Those guys were liars. All they want to do was increase the Pentagon, have more wars, more corruption, and they never held Trump accountable. We waited
This did not age well.
Long years for them to hold him accountable, and all they did was kiss his ass and show that they don't really believe in freedom. They said all this stuff about freedom.
I mean, that's literally what happened. You know, Tim Pool and Charlie Kirk and even Marjorie Taylor Greene fell in line when Donald Trump attacked Iran and said that he was doing what was necessary to keep the peace. He's a great president. We need to trust him. They went from being anti-war full stop because Biden wasn't even participating in active combat with any U.S. troops. We were sending weapons to Ukraine, and he was saying, and then they were saying that we were the party of pro-war and all this other shit. But then when Donald Trump gets in office and not only sends weapons to like Israel and what have you, but also actively partakes in conflicts to help Israel against its enemies, then all of a sudden out of nowhere it's you know, oh, Donald Trump has to do what's right. These people shift the narrative to say whatever's convenient, because both the Nazi right wing and the Zionist white nationalist right wing don't really care about being consistent on this issue. It's about establishing a white supremacist right wing order of thought in the United States, something, you know, that's pro-Israel, that's pro-white, that's anti-worker, you know, anti-immigrant, you know, anti-gay or what have you. That's what their politics is nominally about. They care very little about foreign policy or domestic affairs relating to economic policy. I'm gonna repeat this a lot during this video, but again, I don't think Cenk Uyger has been listening the past 4 years. If he really somewhere in his heart thinks that Republicans in any era, I would dare say, especially after Richard Nixon, care anything about physical conservatism or you know, balancing the budget or helping working people. It's like literally the Democrats and Republicans, although still very similar, because conservatism and liberalism are very similar ideologies, have drifted so far apart that it seems sometimes when they're debating one another that they're not living in the same reality. We have Democrats talking about things like tax credits and expansions of policies that help people learn trade skills and open small businesses, and then you have Republicans on stage saying that the black gay teacher at the school is doing stuff to your children to make them gay later. So again, two different realities, two different kinds of talking points, and I refuse to accept this notion that anything manga was about economic populism. This is simply just a lie.
But they never meant it. They said all this stuff about drain the swamp, but they never meant it. They said all this anti-war stuff, but they never meant it. We're going to come back on here in 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, and we're going to keep doing a check.
So, Cenk, that was kind of the context of that discussion. And just for the audience and for you, since there's two of us and one of you, and we don't want to be like jumping on all over each other, and maybe Kyle and I have disagreements on things, I thought I would kind of handle the first 30 minutes more or less. Kyle would handle the second 30 minutes. You've got a engagement you've got to go to, hard out in an hour, so that's the amount of time that we have.
We could do this for 4 hours if we had the time.
I'm sure we could, and it would be painful for all involved. But in any case, we've got a hard out for Cenk in 1 hour. We want to be very respectful of his time. So with everything that's happened in Trump 2.0, do you still feel that original optimism that you expressed at the time, do you still feel that was well-founded?
Absolutely. And I'm part of the reason I wanted to come on is to see if you guys are on planet Earth or live in an alternate reality. And I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm being genuine about it. And Chris, I went back and watched our conversation from back then.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Yeah, you kept saying like things against Trump. And that's why I didn't even think it was a debate. It was a discussion because I was like, yeah, I totally agree with you.
She's showing you Trump's ass. It's like Trump shows his ass regularly on economic and domestic policy and even foreign policy. Trump has consistently spent more money on the defense budget. Trump has consistently taken away, like today, things like Medicare and drew down things like food stamps. Trump mismanaged the pandemic. Trump also escalated the amount of drone strikes and military engagements that the United States of America was participating in the Middle East. So she was showing you Trump's ass, and in no way, shape, or form was she wrong for that. Because what you're doing here is trying to say, oh, this time will be different, and maybe the people will hold him accountable. Republican politicians don't work that way. They won't be forced to do the right thing by their constituents. Even if every Republican was to become a socialist right now and garner a sense of class consciousness and demand from both Democrats and Republicans that they do the right thing. Not some Democrats would even do the right thing, but not one Republican would do what's right for this country and what's right by working class people in this country. And the very idea to think that is you're being paid to say that shit, to whitewash the horrible things that Donald Trump has done over the past 9 or so years of him being on the political spotlight.
On Trump and the Republicans, etc. I was talking about the populist right and the independents that voted for Trump, the actual voters. And you saw it in that clip. I don't address Trump. I don't address any Republicans. I address the voters. So what has happened since then? Joe Rogan has come out against what Trump has done with Mahmoud Halil, with Abrego Garcia, almost all of the
not really. This is bullshit, bro. Because Joe Rogan and Asmongold and all these other morons are coming out beating their chests like in apes, talking about how Trump is a badass who's getting in there and doing what needs to be done for the country. And just because Joe Rogan or Asmongold or any of these other assholes briefly say like, oh, that's messed up, does not mean that they don't agree with most of the other shit that's happening in most of the other stuff that is being done by the Republican Party. Because again, this is not a movement about consistency, human rights, and economic populism. This is a movement of white supremacy and hatred for people who they deem not fit to fit in American society.
Hosts have come out against the war, ranging from Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon. Then you've got the politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene. You've got Tim Dillon. You've got. I'm not sure you can name a right-wing MAGA host or independent host that's for the war in Iran.
Yes, you can. They all are.
I'm genuinely curious. Like, Are you guys not seeing that,
like
or does that somehow magically not count?
So, Cenk, I have the same question as to whether or not you're on planet Earth. Because, first of all, let me ask you this question.
Get him, Crystal.
Do you think that Trump 2.0 is better or worse than Trump 1.0?
Trump is irrelevant.
No, he's not irrelevant, because I'll tell you why. Here's why. You expressed optimism about how all this would go. And the reason you were optimistic is because,
you're misunderstanding.
No, we just saw your tweet, okay? The reason you were optimistic.
She can't say anything to this dude. Like, we got, like, dude, since when did Cenk Uyger, one of the loudest former leftists in politics, become such a little bitch that when you air the lightest criticisms of his ideology, that he cries like a bitch? Like, dude, like, nobody is gonna have mercy on you, because we can all clearly see what you're doing and what you're promoting, dude. You're obviously, again, whitewashing the white supremacy of the MAGA movement in America, which is pretty much just a Nazi movement, but I digress. But neither wings of the Make America Great Again movement, the Zionists or the Nazis, care anything about economic policies or human rights or consistency from Donald Trump. This is what they voted for. They voted to hurt people, and it will go down with the country if it means keeping down black people and Jews or Hispanic immigrants. They care very little about what happened to Mr. Garcia. And in fact, a lot of right-wingers still repeat the same lies about Mr. Garcia and say that he was a criminal. So they're all in on this shit.
Explain the tweet.
It's because you thought these various groups and influencers would hold him accountable. So did they constrain his behavior, for example, when Elon Musk was running around with a chainsaw, slashing Social Security and gutting the federal government and gutting the CFPB? No, we didn't. In fact, we saw Joe Rogan host Elon Musk, not to mention Mark Zuckerberg and Mark Andreessen, to make the case for those things, okay? No accountability there. Did we see them constrain his behavior and hold him accountable when he launched a crypto shitcoin, the most corrupt scheme in American history, most likely? No, he did it. He's faced no accountability for that. You mentioned some dissent from Rogan on the kidnapping of college students off of college campuses. Is it the right that organized in opposition to that? No. It's the left.
Because you can, like, and it's this thing where they think that because Joe Rogan in a passing comment says something good or bad makes or breaks that he's being politically consistent and is just an innocent guy trying to learn. Because, like, I can literally say this, right? I can say, man, what happened to that Abrego Garcia guy was bad. Now, let's get back to talking about how most immigrants are criminals and rapists. You see what I just did there? I lightly acknowledged something bad while going back to the same exact talking points. Nothing really changed about my politics. I just I acknowledged something and then I moved past it. So, and then the reason why they do stuff like this, because right-wing politics, don't get me wrong, politics in general is all about strategy. But right-wing politics is all about plausible deniability. It's literally that one short that I posted where right-wing people are, they smear shit on the wall like little 8-year-olds. They color on the wall and what have you. And then after, and you are the adult, the leftists and decent liberals are the adults in the room. And then we have to go get the Windex or the pine saw or the graffiti remover. And we have to put in our elbow grease to remove that shit off the wall. So it's like, these people, again, it's literally just like how Nick Fuentes says he's not violent while promoting violent activities and saying that white people are oppressed and violence is being committed against white people. They have talking points that are constructed in such a way to maintain plausible deniability. And it's like, and I'm only gonna say this one more time. No, I've been long, but the main way that right-wing politics is promoted, right-wing politics is not promoted by people like even though it is, but people don't get into it through people like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, or Candace Owens, or Jesse Lee Peterson anymore, and even people like James Hake or Mike Cernovich, or even Fuentes himself. They get into right-wing politics from people like Asman Gold and Joe Rogan, people who go onto the internet and claim to be, how can I say, innocent intermediate people standing in the middle, while at the end of the day and at the end of everything, these people do nothing but promote abject white supremacy. So or hatred and economic inequality. It's always something bad coming out of these people's mouths, because I can literally do the same shit where I can be like, but leftists, especially like myself, are way too principled for this. You know, people can say like, okay, I'm not a leftist, but I like some of Joe Biden's policies, or I should say I'm not a liberal, or I'm not a leftist, but Bernie Sanders sounds pretty base. Anybody can do it, but right-wing politics are so toxic and are so inflammatory and are so full of bigotry that we cannot even acknowledge the fact that these that these political consistencies exist within their party or movement, I should say.
And it's liberals. The only time that Trump's actions have been constrained at all in this Trump 2.0 era, which is vastly worse than I even expected when you and I had that conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got men in hundreds of people in a concentration camp.
And they're building
I didn't see any accountability from the right on that. I don't see any accountability from the right on an American city that is right now under invasion by our own troops, Marines on the ground in the city of LA. No, I don't see any accountability there. I see an administration that, as I predicted, the guardrails are completely off. And the only places where he has been constrained at all is when the left and liberals organized against Elon Musk, Tesla protests, showing up at town halls, etc., made him toxic. He had to be turfed out of the administration. And in the context of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, when you had mass left liberal resistance, even pushing Democratic leaders who were lame and weak to do something, Chris Van Hollen goes down to El Salvador, and the administration did something they did not want to do, which was to bring him back. That is the only time this administration has been constrained. It has had nothing to do with the right, had everything to do with liberals and the left organizing.
And in fact, when people were doing things like protests, people were blocking ICE and stuff like that, they said that people were being paid, and also they were cheering on sending the Marines in and other military personnel to assault protesters. These people went back to their same back to military police state logic. Nothing really changed about right-wingers from 2020 up till today. Most right-wing people and people that voted Republican this time were pro cracking down on protests in LA and other places. And they even went so far to say a bunch of different narratives, from the protests are being organized by rich detached kids that don't really care about workers because they don't have real jobs, all the way to saying that they were paid actors. One of the largest protests, they were saying one of the most largest, the 51 protests, No Kings protests, one of the largest organized protests in United States history, were being organized by paid actors. That was the conspiracy theory that they were going with. So again, this idea that that right wingers were in any way going to hold Donald Trump accountable for the horrible that he's doing is again ridiculous.
Against him.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So you asked about 12 questions.
Here we go.
I would love the time to answer it, but you didn't actually answer my question. Do you see a massive MAGA revolt against the war? And I'm being genuine. It's a literal question. Or do you just not see it?
No.
Cenk, here's what I can tell you. Okay, Charlie Kirk, your buddy. He has already.
It's not my buddy.
He has
Yes,
already
it
gone.
is. Yes, it
He's
is.
already gone.
To say.
That's your
He's
friend.
already gone
Dude,
from.
He
he's-
literally was talking about having a beer with this dumb Nazi fuckwit, bro. No, that's your friend, bro. You sat down with him and said that y'all can have a beer over economic issues, when Charlie Kirk is a white supremacist who says he's scared to get on the plane because the pilot might be colored. So no, that is your buddy. And again, hanging out with Charlie Kirk in such a non-antagonistic way whitewashes him and has people ignore the fact that Charlie Kirk is not only a bigot, but he's definitively anti-working class.
Already gone from being critical of the Iran war to, guess what? He got a call from the White House. And now what's he saying? Oh, I trust Trump. Trump is the man for this moment. I know he's going to make the right decision.
The exact
Steve
quote
Bannon.
is,
Go
can I
ahead.
give the exact quote?
Yeah.
This is from Charlie Kirk. Quote, "We must trust Trump in this situation." Go ahead with Steve Bannon.
So
Move the goalposts. You see what I'm saying? Move the goalposts. In a brief condemnation of the war, and now they come out in full support of Trump's strikes on Iran. You notice how they did that. I wouldn't really call it a war, but these strikes. Trump, did the strikes, because they ran on a ticket of quote unquote being against war, and then as soon as Donald Trump did some sort of foreign intervention, they disagreed with it for plausible deniability, and then after a few calls from the White House and the smoke cleared, and they got a couple of conversations with Trump himself probably or his advisors or press relations groups or whatever, they then move the goalposts and say we gotta trust them, and it's something that they had to do, and it's something that they failed at doing as well. But that's a whole nother conversation for another video.
Steve Bannon, hold on, Steve Bannon, put up element number 4. This is the Financial Times today. Steve Bannon says, if the president, as commander-in-chief, makes a decision to do this, the MAGA movement, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Matt Gaetzes, we will fight it up till the end. But if he has more intelligence and makes that case to the American people, the MAGA movement will support President Trump.
See
when
what
Trump
I mean?
says that he gets to define what America first is,
move the goalpost.
he's right about that. And so when you have Bannon, who also was critical of Elon Musk originally and got a call from the White House and said, cut it out, and he bent the knee.
And by the way, this is straight up cult shit right here. Because if 1 second you can call out war being bad when somebody else does it, but then when Trump not only does the exact same thing you're criticizing, but actually actively instructs you to be okay with it, that means you're in a fucking cult. Because you went from from saying one thing to saying another because Donald Trump called you and told you that this needs to be okay. We need to spin this story to be pro-war.
These people, time and time again, Cenk, all they do is ultimately when Trump makes the decision, they bend the knee. We are already far enough into this administration to know there has been no constraint on his action that has come from the right. None. And we're in a war with Iran. Okay. We are already in a war with Iran. They didn't constrain him here. He's doing whatever the hell he wants to do.
Nope.
Okay. So you guys just spoke for like 8 minutes doing a straw man. Okay.
I mean,
so you make it sound, and this is
see the smearing shit, writing and coloring on a wall analogy from earlier. That's why they have to talk
so
for a
harmful.
long time.
You guys make it sound like I'm pro-Trump, and I think that MAGA is just a bunch of angels who are secretly left wing, and they're gonna.
Nobody said that you said that. We're saying that you're whitewashing the cultist nature and white supremacy of the Make America Great Again movement and people that voted for Donald Trump. That's what's being said here. People are not saying that right-wingers are secret leftists. Nobody ever thought that you said that. But you're ignoring the blatant cultist nature and fascist tendencies of the Make America Great Again movement. And that's the problem that Kyle, Crystal, and others like Francesca, where you had people quitting TYT because of this. Y'all have very few employees left because of how desperate y'all are for money. You have Anna Kasparian going on a podcast with a white supremacist, Patrick Bet-David, in order to use her credentials to justify economic inequality with Patrick Bet-David. And you're doing the same when you go visit people like Charlie Kirk. So nobody is saying that these people are secret leftists. We're saying that these people are obvious degenerates who have no real beliefs except for what Trump tells them to say.
Magically agree with us on every issue, and the minute that Trump does something wrong, they're going to all push back 100%, and that's what I believed. I believed in rainbows and unicorns. Of course not, Crystal.
See?
Of course not.
Look at this. He has to do all this extra shit because he cannot confront the real facts of the situation that Donald Trump is is in many ways, both on an economic level and on a so-called foreign policy level, making America look bad. He can't deal with these facts about what Donald Trump actually did and is doing, and how the right-wing base of all variety is falling in line. So we get this whitewashing of what's going on, or this fake, this Karen shit where he's talking about you're making a straw man out of me. No. Crystal is holding you accountable for what you said. She is not strawmanning you, because you wouldn't be in this position, Cenk. And it's like, and I'm going to be a little bit of a conservative, but it's called personal responsibility. You wouldn't be on this program, because I would rather be broke and be a straight up leftist than be a rich right winger or somebody that whitewashes right wing talking points. And Cenk, you chose the latter. So now you're on this program getting embarrassed because of the shit that you said, and the whitewashing of Trump policies that you do, and the whitewashing of how his base behaves. So this is your fault. Crystal is just repeating back to you the things that you do and say.
trying to move them. Moving the other side is super hard. And so when you see something, anything where they actually agree with us, you have to encourage that. So when
which is absolutely nothing. These people are not anti-war. They are only anti-war when a Democrat is in office. They say things for what's convenient at the time and then move the goalposts along later. And again, they might say like, oh, I don't like war. I don't like that Trump did this one thing 6 years ago for plausible deniability's sake. But it's obvious that these people fall in line with 99% of the decisions that Donald Trump makes. And in fact, retracting statements and saying we must trust Donald Trump, like Charlie Kirk, your buddy, said, is a clear-cut example of what Anna Kasperi and Kyle Kalinske and I are going to be saying throughout this video. I have only about maybe 4 minutes, 30 more seconds of this I'm going to cover. But yeah, Cenk Uyger in this case is full of shit.
you say all the things that you said, is Trump a bad guy? Of course, of course. So if you're listening out here, guys,
and act like it. So what does that make the people that will vote for a bad person? Keep in mind, before we go along with this video, Donald Trump is an adjudicated rapist. He's been accused of assault by 25 women. He also is a 34-count felon. He spurred up the Capitol riot to overturn the 2020 election. He's a racist that's supported by racist people, like at Charlottesville, the very fine people on both sides comment. He's a bad person and he's a bad president. So people that vote for bad people are clearly bad people. And they want horrible things to happen to women and minorities in the working poor in this country because they want to feel as though they are getting ahead of somebody. Or it's just race hate or whatever different motivations people had to vote for Donald Trump. But it was not about economic policy, populism. It was about white supremacy.
The framing of all of this is totally wrong. Like we're having a conversation. Oh, do you think Trump's a bad? Of course I think Trump's a bad guy. He's totally authoritarian. That's why I voted against him. That's why I worked so hard against him. So even the framing makes me like sound defensive when you guys started with a premise that's out in la la land. We totally oppose Trump. So now the second part of the premise that's totally wrong is, do I think that MAGA is going to revolt?
Again, it's like the analogy that they like to use for black people when it comes to talking about criminality. Well, I can reverse that. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. If Donald Trump is somebody who said things like he wants Jews counting his money and not black people, that he wants black people to be removed from the casino floor when his wife walks in, a person who is supported by people like David Duke and Enrico Tarrio, people that marched at Charlottesville, what does that tell us about our president? That tells us that our president is a white supremacist thug rapist, and he's not a man to be trusted, and the people that have the audacity to vote for him voted because they don't, because being a rapist or a white supremacist wasn't a deal breaker to them. So that means that these people might in turn be rapists and white supremacists. I don't understand why is this so hard to understand.
Trump from day one. Why would they? They love Trump. Of course not. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for, is there one or two issues where there is actual agreement?
And one or two issues won't move people over. There's plenty of Trump supporters who are racist and hate black and Hispanic people, but they don't care if their fellow white people is like gay or something like that. They don't care if unions are allowed to prosper, but they don't like the fact that they see black people in positions of power or regularly appearing in media. You can have one liberal belief and still count out of everything as a conservative. Stop lying. Well, stop bullshitting.
And can we take that agreement and do something interesting to restrain Trump in those issues? So when you talk about immigration...
And so when has that worked?
Okay, hold on. Well, we're in the middle of it right now. So I'll tell
we're
you
at war with Iran, Cenk. Hate to break it to you. We're at war with Iran. It didn't work.
Okay. So, Crystal, let me finish. So when you talk about immigration and all the things that he's terrible on, I know what MAGA's movable on or not. I talk about it on the Young Turks all the time. If you think you're going to move them on immigration, you are nuts. They're not going to move it.
And that right there is the crux of what we're talking about, is because they are racist. They don't care about how, because statistically proven, if they cared about facts and economics, they would be pro-immigration and want more, because they would be aware of the contributions that immigrants make to the United States of America. But unfortunately, they ignore all the contributions and even take it a step further to say, for some of them, like, how do immigrants benefit my country? Besides little economic things, and they are for the deportation and harassment and persecution of these immigrants anyway. So no difference is made about this issue when talking to them, because again, this is about race hatred and it's not about economic populism.
An inch on immigration. So I fight him tooth and nail on that dungeon in El Salvador that they're sending people to, the Marines in the streets.
Building a concentration camp.
There's some issues like immigration where they haven't moved an inch and they never will move an inch.
Because they're racist,
There's
dude.
some issues like the Marines in the streets where a smattering of them are like,
and they're pro that. Most of them are pro police and military brutality against left-wing protesters because they don't see us as human, especially black leftists. So this bullshit about the Make America Great Again movement, again, having like these inconsistencies that can move them over, is hogwash. I don't understand, besides being paid, why Cenk Uyger would keep saying this. I'm only going to cover 12 minutes of this because I don't want this video to go on forever. But to sum up what I said, and I feel like this requires a conclusion, just because right-wingers say an occasional correct statement for the sake of plausible deniability doesn't mean that they can be moved over to left-wing positions. And I'm talking about his constituents and not necessarily the commentators, because the commentators influence the constituents. Number two, the Make America Great Again movement is a cult. According to whatever Donald Trump says is right or wrong or whatever's convenient at the time, they will move the goalposts accordingly. And last but not least, remember, guys, the animating force of most far-right movements like the Make America Great Again movement, whether you're talking about the neo-Nazis that vote for Trump and support him, or the Zionist white nationalists that support Donald Trump, this movement is about white supremacy and race hatred. It's about homophobia and transphobia and sexism. It's about people who say things like feminism went too far and things were better in the 1950s. That's what this is about. The Make America Great Again movement was never about economic populism. That's just an argument they use to waste your time. So this has been James, the Skate Punk Lefty, with a new video. Hope you have a nice day.